Some new cars are actually worse than their predecessors. In this video, I'm going to tell you about certain models which weren't as good as those that they replaced. Actually, there's been lots of models which weren't as good as those that they replaced over the years, but here I'm going to tell you the 10 worst offenders. I'm Matt Watson, and you're watching Car Wow.
Buying a new car? Then head to Car Wow, and my team will help you find your next car at a fair price. Car Wow, your one-stop car buying comparison site.
The Honda Civic Type R EP3 from the early noughties is one of the best all-round hot hatches of the last few decades. Fact, it's practical, brilliant to drive, and it only cost around £16,000 when it was new. Okay, so not everyone liked its bread van design, but Honda fixed that when it brought out the Civic Type R FN2 in 2007. That car looked more like an escape pod for a spaceship, but it was actually worse than the EP3 in a few important ways. For starters, it cost almost £20,000, which was £4,000 more than the EP3. And it got fat. It weighed almost 1,340 kilos, which was nearly 100 kilos more than the old car. And obviously weight is the enemy of performance. Now, all of that would have been okay because you can counteract the extra weight with extra performance. But Honda didn't do that. It pretty much got the same 2-litre engine as the old car. Oh, no, sorry, it had 201 horsepower, which was 1 horsepower more than the EP3 had. 1 horse, just 1. And if that wasn't bad enough, the FN2 got an old-fashioned torsion beam rear axle instead of the EP3's multi-link independent rear suspension. So it wasn't anywhere near as fun to drive. It's disappointing. It was a step backwards. That's also a fact. The BMW E60 M5 is one of the most crazy high-performance saloons ever. Can you name another naturally aspirated V10 saloon with more than 500 horsepower? I don't think you could. But the car that replaced it didn't have anywhere near as much character. Sure, the F10 M5 was probably better in so many ways. Its engine was more reliable, and its automatic gearbox actually worked and changed gears well, rather than the horrible SMG jerky nonsense in the E60 M5. The trouble is, the new car looked so ordinary compared to the futuristic bangle-designed E60. And its 4.4-litre twin-turbo V8 didn't sound anywhere near as good as that high-revving, screaming V10. And worst of all, you couldn't get it as an estate, like you could with the E61 M5. And there's nothing cooler than a BMW M5 touring now, is there? The original Ford Mustang was a great car. It looked brilliant and it had an iconic V8 engine. But one particular Mustang threatened to kill the car completely, and that's the Mustang 2 from the 70s. It looked a bit rubbish, almost like a Mustang-shaped birthday cake. And it came out during the fuel crisis, so to make it more efficient, Ford gave the Mustang 2 one of the most pathetic engines ever. It was a 2.3-litre 4-cylinder. It only made 90 horsepower. So much for being a muscle car. Now, putting a 90 horsepower engine into a Mustang is a bit like going to the pub after lockdown and ordering an alcohol-free beer. What's the point? Yes, I know I have a Mazda MX-5 Mark II, but the fact is that the Mark I was the better car. Now, actually, underneath the skin, Mazda didn't change that much for the Mark II, which was also known as the NB model. There were a few changes, though, and some of them not for the better. For starters, Mazda got rid of the awesome pop-up headlights. Now, that was actually a legal requirement, so it didn't maim pedestrians if you hit them. So that wasn't Mazda's fault. What was Mazda's fault is that they gave it some headlights which made it look like a dish, like... yeah, it's an ugly looking car. Even the facelift version, which is a bit more angled, still don't look great. It's a bit gormless. Biggest problem though with the Mark II MX-5 was rust. You see, Mazda decided to give bits of the Mark II chassis an extra layer of metal to make it stronger in a crash. But these layers of metal actually trap water and cause the chassis to rot. It's not good. So when I bought my car, I had to make very, very sure that it didn't have any rot in the chassis legs. Anyway, this extra metal didn't just cause the car to rot more, but it also added weight. In fact, the Mark II overall was 100 kilos heavier than the Mark I. So why did I buy the Mark II rather than the Mark I? Well, I think its cabin's a bit nicer, more comfortable, but that wasn't the main reason. The main reason is that in the UK, the Mark II 1.8 IS model came with a Torsen limited slip differential as standard, and I wanted to do skids in my car, so I bought that. Now, you're probably aware, but the Mazda MX-5 was actually inspired by the original Lotus Elan, which was a 2-seat convertible from the 60s. It only had a 1.6-litre engine from a Ford Cortina, but the Elan was so small and light that it didn't need much power to be quick. And it handled brilliantly because it had a steel chassis and a lightweight fiberglass body. The car actually only weighed in at 680 kilos. That's less than a Volkswagen Up. Now, Lotus stopped building the Elan in 1975, but it brought the car back in 1989. But this all-new model was nothing like the original. Instead of having the classic front engine, rear-wheel drive layout, it was front-wheel drive. It was still made of fiberglass, so it was still pretty light. In fact, it weighed in at slightly less than a ton, but that's still 300 kilos more than the original Elan. And because the gearbox, the drive shafts and the engine, which came from an Isuzu by the way, had to fit under the bonnet, the car ended up looking really, really dumpy. But the worst thing of all is that Kia bought the rights to the new Elan when Lotus had finished making it in 1995. So your exclusive Lotus actually became a cheap Kia convertible. Some boring petrol heads will tell you that you only buy a Porsche Boxster or a Cayman because you can't afford a 911. They're wrong. It's rubbish. Those cars are actually brilliant. Well, they used to be anyway. You see, the old 981 models had a lovely, naturally aspirated flat six engine. It suited them perfectly and it sounded lovely. But when Porsche replaced the old Boxster and Cayman with the new 718 versions, it fitted a turbocharged flat four engine instead, you know, like you get in a Subaru. It did this to reduce fuel consumption and reduce CO2 emissions, and fitting a turbo is a good way to get more power out of a smaller fuel efficient engine. Trouble is, this turbocharged engine made the new car sound a bit crap, and it took away the instant throttle response you get from a naturally aspirated engine. Thank goodness Porsche saw the error of its ways and gave the new Boxster Spider and the GTS versions of the Boxster and the Cayman a naturally aspirated flat six again. And those cars are brilliant. In fact, if you want to see my full in-depth video review of the Boxster Spider, I'll put a link up there. Click on that. You can go check it out, watch the video. There's also a link in the description below. The Toyota Celica was a brilliant rally car and the road car was excellent too. It was great fun to hoon down a gravel track and its four-wheel drive system made it really fast on twisty roads. The GT4 versions were the best of the bunch. They had a 2-litre turbocharged engine with up to 251 horsepower and they do 0 to 60 miles an hour in about 6 seconds. That's only half a second slower than a brand new GR Yaris. But the car that replaced this Celica in 1999 was a total disappointment. It didn't have any rally heritage and the most powerful versions only made 200 horsepower. And instead of a proper four-wheel drive system, the new Celica came with front-wheel drive. So the quickest versions did 0 to 60 in 7 seconds. It was basically just a Corolla in a posh, edgy suit. The Mark II Mitsubishi Eclipse was an excellent car from the 1990s. It came with loads of bits borrowed from the Mitsubishi Evo, like its engine and four-wheel drive system. But instead of a saloon, it was a cool two-door coupe. And one even starred in the first Fast and Furious movie before it got blown up. But Mitsubishi really screwed up when they made, just thinking about it is making me laugh. Anyway, they screwed up when they introduced the new third generation version in 2000. Out went the Rallybred 2-litre Evo engine and in went a big, heavy V6 from a Dodge Caravan minivan. But that didn't give you extra power. Oh no. It produced the same 210 horsepower as the old 4-cylinder engine. And did I mention it also had front-wheel drive, not rear or all-wheel drive? What the heck were they thinking? There's nothing fast nor furious about that. The Volkswagen Golf GTI is the godfather of all modern hot hatches, and most GTIs have been brilliant little cars ever since the Mark I came out in the 70s. But VW sort of slipped up when it made the Mark IV in the late 1990s. Now I know what you're thinking, yeah, the Mark III wasn't that great, but it was better than the Mark IV. For starters, you could get the Mark IV GTI with a diesel engine. Not a GTD, a GTI with a diesel engine. And to make matters worse, that diesel engine only produced 115 horsepower. Yeah, that's right, 115. It was so slow that it took 10.3 seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles an hour. That's 2 seconds slower than a petrol-powered Mark III Golf GTI. Yeah, that car should never have had a GTI badge on it. Thankfully, Volkswagen did make a much better 180 horsepower 1.8 petrol model, which did 0 to 60 miles an hour in 7.9 seconds. But that's only 0.4 of a second quicker than the old Mark III GTI. But one of the biggest problems with the Mark IV GTI was the way it looked. You see, it didn't look like a GTI. It was pretty much identical to a normal Mark IV Golf. Thankfully, the versions that came after the Mark IV were much better, including the latest Mark VIII. But I reckon if you're looking for a hot hatch Volkswagen Golf, you need the R model, and I've reviewed it. You'll be blown away how quick it is. So if you click on the pop-out banner up there or follow the link below the video, you can watch my full in-depth video review of that car and see how quick it goes from 0 to 60 miles an hour, because you will be amazed. You will be. The final car on my list is a Tesla Model S. Now wait. Tesla fanboys, before you just stop criticizing me in the comments. Okay, I'm gonna explain myself. I know the Tesla Model S has got better with the very latest version that they've just unveiled, and yes, I know I've put my name down and ordered one. You know, that Plaid Plus thing that has like a range of over 500 miles and can do 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds and the standing quarter in around 9 seconds. It's gonna be amazing, but there is something better about the original Model S since it came out in 2012. Older versions of the Model S came with free electricity. That's right, free electricity. You actually got to use the superchargers for free. Didn't have to pay for them. Nowadays, if you buy a Tesla, you've got to pay to use a supercharger. Every new Model S came with free electricity for life. And this free power didn't go away if you sold the car. So if you buy an old Model S that was registered before 2017, you can still get free charging forever. It's cool. You don't get that with a new one. Shame. Hope you'll enjoy the video. If you did, please give it a like. Click on those windows there, you can watch some more content. And if you click on that box there, you can download the CarWow app for free. And it has a special feature which allows you to scan a car's number plate to get a valuation on it. Download it.